Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
If nothing else, Brexit has produced some memorable lines. Purgatory before entering heaven is how one Conservative MP described the UK's transition deal with the European Union. Like a bucket of cold sick, according to another. Well, this morning, fishermen and disappointed Tory MPs took to the Thames to protest. As many as half of the 12 seats that the Scottish Conservatives won from the SNP in last year's election are in areas heavily dependent on fishing. And the Scottish Conservative leader, Ruth Davidson, did promise Scottish trawlermen that Brexit would give them back immediate control of the UK's fishing grounds. That pledge has now been broken by Downing Street.
What's here? Dumping.
Quite amazing. And it goes, barges now dumping fish in the Thames. Yeah. There we go. It's happening now live on Thomas Brexit podcast.
Absolutely tragic. Oh, what a waste. I mean, beautiful eating fish. And this is happening. 9% of the haddock quota is all the UK fleet gets from the European Union.
That is good fish, Nigel, now you've thrown
Oh,
away.
it's dreadful, isn't it? Absolutely breaks my heart to see that happening. But it's happening on a massive scale, every day, all over the country. Can people please wake up?
Well, our political editor explains now why fishing has become such a toxic issue for the government.
150 a choice!
A brisk early hours trade in the famous fish market at Peterhead.
Here we've got a lovely shot of haddock here, some beautiful coley, it's fresh. Some of this fish is only 24 hours old.
A 50, 600.
Their newly landed catch selling out to supermarkets, factories and restaurants from across the UK and as far as Spain. But it is the fishermen here starting to believe that they are the first ones to be traded off in the Brexit negotiation.
This is too big an opportunity to let go. And if they do, they will never be forgiven. They will go down in history as the people who have failed this nation.
Up the coast at Fraserburgh Port, regardless of the rough seas, these out-of-quota vessels won't be fishing herring and mackerel today. The skipper, George West, expects Brexit to change that, but fears history repeating itself.
Our hope is that, having been sold down the river once, that we wouldn't be sold down the river again.
You think it might happen? Sort of the Heath thing? Ted Heath might happen again?
Yes, well, I hope not.
This is the map that fishermen want to see again. UK vessels fish 40% of the fish taken from UK waters. The other 60% will be other EU nations. Fishermen would like to see that number increase to 80 or 90%, like Iceland or the Faroe Islands. Currently, 2/3 of the industry exports go to the European Union tariff-free. They also want this maintained, and also for higher value processed fish. Fishing was one of the symbols of the Leave campaign, and there can be no doubting the scale of the opportunity from no longer having to share our coastal waters. But even if it doubles in size, it's still only a fraction of a percent of our national income. And any government trying to seal a deal will surely prioritise finance or pharmaceuticals. Can risking a transition period really be worth the price of fish? The government's answer, yes, the transition is a priority and it's taking the flak in places like Fraserburgh, trying to reassure MPs that the same calculus won't apply again for the long-term relationship. That's precisely the fear here.
Nothing is temporary. We had a warning from that from another big coastal state around the Northeast Atlantic, Norway, who said the one thing you must not do is enter into temporary arrangements because they will become permanent. We are acutely aware of that. Again, access to the waters needs to be under the control of the United Kingdom. What the EU are asking for is actually worse than the present deal. Actually worse than the present deal, where we would have a seat at the table in the corner without a voice.
But nothing is simple in Brexit. The wider fish industry eagerly anticipates that boom, but will need to keep access to migrant labour to deal with the glut, and crucially does not want tariffs on the trade in processed fish. You also export as well, so you want to keep it tariff-free?
The opportunity for investment is considerable.
but we also want opportunity to trade with Europe on a competitive basis.
Finished product?
This is the... No, not quite finished.
Oh, okay.
This is the fillets.
It looks pretty good.
Skin on. It's still to be skinned and then frozen.
The skin's the best bit.
Have you tried it?
The PM would not still be in number 10 without 13 Scottish Tory MPs who promised Brexit would make the UK an independent coastal state again. That prospect now delayed, MPs trusting that it will be delivered by 2021. Locals here, though, mindful of history and the presence of bigger fish in the Brexit negotiation, are not so sure. Faisal Islam, Sky News in Peterhead.
Let's go to our senior political correspondent, Beth Rigby, who's been following the fish protest flotilla this morning. Back on dry land, what's been achieved?
I am on dry land, Adam, and what has been achieved? Well, I think what's been achieved is that they definitely have got their protest and their problems front and centre stage. We saw Nigel Farage board the boat. I asked him about why he was there. And really, these fishermen and Nigel Farage and some other members of UKIP and some Conservative MPs very angry about the fact that the government are not going to take back control of British waters immediately after Brexit. Now, Aaron, who was there for Fishing for Leave, said to me that the quota arrangements coming into force with the EU is going to cause huge problems for the fishing industry. He said that fleets could be destroyed before we get back control of our waters at the end of 2020. When I put it to him that the Michael Gove point that yes, it's a suboptimal deal to give the EU control over fisheries policy until the end of 2020, he said to me, Michael Gove's trying to put lipstick on a pig. This is a betrayal, he said. It's a betrayal of fishermen and it's a betrayal of fishing communities. Now, Adam, what was interesting about it was billed as all of the Conservative MPs were going to turn up. Craig McKinley, Ross Thompson were going to come on the boat and throw the fish. In the end, that didn't happen. Ross Thompson was there at the beginning, but then he ended and left, and that was because Nigel Farage jumped on the boat. And I think that actually there's an issue where Theresa May did not want Conservative MPs to get involved in that. Look, the big question of all of it is, though, despite the protests, will anything change? I think that the government are going to get their way on the transitional deal, and I don't think it will.
And Beth, just to say, I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg was billed as the star of this. He seems to be relying rather low as the leader of the Conservative European Research Group.
Yes, he was on the pier, but he didn't come onto the boat. They had a very brief press conference. As I said, I think that the government are locking down on this. But Adam, I'm going to have to throw back to you because we've got to stop filming here on the pier. So I'll come back to the studio and we can talk more later.
Beth, thank you very much.
Here, the River Thames was the setting for one of the more bizarre Brexit protests today. Tory backbencher Jacob Rees-Mogg wanted to highlight his anger over EU fishermen being allowed into British waters during a transition period. But the limelight was stolen by Nigel Farage with the help of some dead fish, as our political correspondent Carl Dinnan reports.
Steaming up the Thames, a one-boat protest against the proposed deal which would allow European fishermen to keep fishing in British waters during the post-Brexit transition. They were armed with some dead haddock and would have been reinforced by Jacob Rees-Mogg, but he was sent to the wrong pier and had to make his point from the riverside.
This is one of, to my mind, the biggest flaws in the transition deal, and nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. And I think it would be better for the government to get back control of fishing earlier rather than later.
Although he missed the boat today, Rees-Mogg is one of 13 Conservatives who, along with the DUP MP, have written to the Prime Minister saying the current fisheries deal is unacceptable and would be rejected by Parliament.
This started off looking like it was a shot across the Prime Minister's bows, or at least some dead fish. But with Tory MPs now apparently threatening to vote against the EU withdrawal bill, it could be getting more serious.
So inside Parliament, Theresa May reminded potential rebels the government was still committed to taking back control. Eventually.
We'll take back control of our waters. We will ensure that we don't see British fishermen unfairly denied access to other waters, and we want to rebuild our fishing industry.
Out on the river, someone else took control. Nigel Farage had appeared and was using the deceased fish to protest at the waste caused by the fisheries policy.
The whole thing is a disaster.
As his party has no MPs in Parliament, I asked what he thought the Tories should do.
Should Conservatives vote against the transition if the common fisheries policy is included?
Well, they've got to make, listen, they've got to make themselves heard. And by the way, we didn't vote for a transition period anyway.
To reinforce the point, more unfortunate fish followed, with the perhaps implied threat that unless Britain took back control of fisheries sooner, the Brexit deal itself might be sleeping with the fishes. Carl Dinnan, ITV News, on the River Thames.
Now, this morning, Nigel Farage helped trawlers and campaigners dump a box of dead haddock into the River Thames. The protest was held on a boat outside Parliament by Brexiteers angry that a transition deal could see the UK subject to EU fishing rules long after Brexit. Not everyone agrees Britain should be allowed to take back control of the seas, Danish politicians amongst them. Our science editor, Tom Clark, joins us from the town of Skagen in Denmark. Tom, what's the feeling there?
Kathy, hi. Well, this is Skagen. It's Denmark's most northerly fishing port. It is characteristically Baltic right now, I can tell you. But it's also an important, crucial place for this whole debate about Brexit and fisheries. And here's why. These super trawlers behind me, they're part of Denmark's pelagic fishing fleet. They go out after fish like herring and mackerel. And those are the species identified particularly by British fishermen as the ones most unfairly distributed under EU rules. More of the boats like these come into our waters and take what they say are our fish, and it's unfair. That's why you saw these scenes on the Thames earlier. A bit of a shambolic affair, apparently, a single trawler, a token box of haddock going over the side. But the frustration by fishermen who are promised getting control of their fishing back, finding it pretty much sold down the river fairly early on by the government. Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Admiral-in-Chief to the Brexit fishing fleet, coming to their support.
It's not about rocking the boat, it's about standing up for important communities across the country. And one of the reasons this is so important as a Conservative and Unionist is it's a Unionist issue. It is very important in Scotland and in Northern Ireland and in the north of England and in Cornwall, in some of the less prosperous areas of our country. And I think to help them and to stand up for them as an English MP is important in showing the unity of our nation.
So what do they make of taking back control here in Skagen? Well, I put that to a Danish fisherman earlier today. They say the history of these trading relationships is not about borders, it's about trade. They don't really buy the idea of taking back control. Do you think British fishermen are going to get that control that they voted for?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't. I think that, and I also believe that even though that the Scottish and the British fishermen are saying we want our stocks back, that's of course I think that other countries would do that. Denmark would also do that if we were in the same situation. But I don't believe that in the end of the day that this is going to happen, because it turns everything upside down.
A brief example of why that might be, a lot of the herring that's landed here, there's a Shetland trawler under construction just up the road here, is actually for sale in the EU. We offload herring that we catch here. If we get our herring back from European fishermen, where are we going to sell it? And there might be trade tariffs in place that make it hard for us to do so. It's a complicated picture.
Tom, thanks very much.
Brexiteers are taking to the River Thames this morning, led by the Tory MP Jacob Rees-Mogg and the campaign group Fishing for Leave. They've launched a flotilla to call for a clean break from the EU's common fisheries policy during the Brexit transition period. Hopefully we can go now to our senior political correspondent, Beth Rigby. She's in her wellies and she's on board a boat on the Thames. Hi, Beth, what's happening?
Hello. Hi, Jonathan. Well, just as you came to me, Nigel Farage jumped on the boat. So, Mr. Farage, welcome to the flotilla.
Flotilla?
Well, it's
I
not.
only
It's
see one
just
boat,
a boat.
but there's another one
Does
there,
it bring
maybe.
back memories from 2016?
It does. The only thing we're missing is Bob Geldof.
And Kate Hoey.
And his foul mouth. Well, of course, we're missing lovely Kate, but, you know, his foul-mouthed abuse. In many ways, I thought the Fishermen's Flotilla on the Thames and the counter-protest from Geldof and his millionaire friends summed up the referendum.
But, I mean, there is a serious point here about fisheries policy. Behind you are crates of haddock that are about to be thrown back into the Thames. How disappointed were you with the transition deal?
Well, very. I mean, firstly, you know, promises were made that haven't been kept. Secondly, you know, we can talk about the fishing industry and with jobs within it, but let's talk about the environment as well, shall we? The ludicrous situation is haddock stocks in the West Country at the moment are very good indeed, and yet the total allocation for haddock, the British fleet gets 9%. 9%. And what it means is the guys are going out fishing for other species, catching haddock because they can't avoid them, and fish like this are being thrown back dead. It's just mad, the whole thing. So if you look at Norway, Norway's an independent state that not only has a thriving fishing industry, but environmentally is doing the right things as well.
Michael Gove at the Commons said while the transition deal is suboptimal, there's only 1 year where the quotas, we won't have control over them, and then the fishing policy comes back to the UK. Surely the Conservatives are doing a good job in taking back control
They're not
for
taking
the
back.
fishermen by end of 2020.
Well, they told us they'd take back control in 19. That is not happening. We're now told at the start of 2021 it may happen. I don't think this government's got the guts or the strength to stand up and take back our territorial waters. And let me tell you, during that 21-month transition, there are already hundreds of under 10-metre inshore fishermen in this country literally existing on the brink, because the quotas they've been given with the EU are not enough, frankly, to even cover their diesel. So I think what will happen is hundreds of fishermen could go bust in that 21-month period.
The politics of fishing in those communities is very important, but the truth is, isn't it, that financial services is 11% of the economy. Fishing is 0.05% of the economy.
To hell with them then.
But can you see it from the Chancellor's perspective that he needs a deal on financial services over fishing?
Look, if you found somebody in your front room taking your possessions, you'd get rid of them and take back control of your own life. Fishing is the acid test of Brexit. It is the clearest way we can measure actually what's been done. And when it comes to financial services, well, Monsieur Barnier already has made it plain he's not going to give us a good deal.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Farage, for coming on Sky News. I'm not sure have you still got us? We keep going under the bridges and we lose. Oh, you are. When you go onto the bridge, we lose a bit of communication. But what we're on the boat now. Some of the MPs are going to come back on, and Aaron, the fisherman who set up the protest today, and they're going to throw that haddock over into the Thames to try and reflect and amplify the anger that fishermen feel over the fact that while we voted to leave the EU in 2016, we are still not going to be in control of our waters until the end of 2020. MPs are protesting, but in practice, the government have signed off on this transition deal, and fishermen will have to wait until the end of 2020. And now the focus is on the end state. Will they get a good future trade deal for fishermen? As I pointed out to Nigel Farage, in government, at the end of the day, financial services and getting a deal on that will be more important than fishermen.
OK, when they start chucking that fish, we'll come back to you, Beth. Don't get seasick.
We're doing Farage's Fish now, are we?
Sounds like a really terrible band, yeah. So there was another press event today. If you may remember, this has echoes of the nonsense that we saw on the boats during the referendum campaign as well.
Bob Geldof standoff.
Bob Geldof, wasn't that a great moment in our country's history? And we've decided to repeat it by having Nigel Farage throw dead fish off a boat. And this is to symbolise the way that we're not going to have control of our fisheries during transition. It was all a bit of a mess, really. Jacob Rees-Mogg tried to get on the boat as well. He couldn't really do it because there was rules that they hadn't filled in. So it turned into a bit of a messy palaver for absolutely no purpose whatsoever. and therefore serves as a perfect metaphor.
And the
for
dead
entirety of
fish
the rest of
presumably
the process.
symbolises the quota system where you have to get rid of some of your catch and...
Yeah, there's some moves around trying to sort of fix that. The trouble is the surveillance sort of systems that you operate for that are very, very hard to organise. But ultimately, with this stuff, you know, with this, it's the same problem that we have with all of the transition stuff. I mean, Theresa May, really not very long ago, said she would get rid of freedom of movement during transition. She failed on that. She's called an implementation period to implement all of these policies that she was apparently going to have already agreed. She completely failed on that. She said she wasn't going to pay any money to the EU during transition. Completely failed on that. Said the ECJ wouldn't have any control during transition. Completely failed on that. We have to come to a conclusion at some point of why does the UK keep on capitulating? And the reason it keeps on capitulating is because the fundamental structure of Brexit means that if we get to no deal in 2019 with no regulatory capacity to take on the things the EU used to do, it would be a catastrophe for this country. So every time it comes to the crunch, the UK gives in. And the fish and all of this nonsense around it is just another piece of evidence
David
of how
Davis
that
did win the
fundamental
right
process
to negotiate trade deals.
Yes, indeed. I mean, the Europeans are literally laughing about that because there's no country on earth that's going to do a trade deal with someone until they know what its relationship is with the single market. You would never do a trade... Britain is either going to have a market of 60 million people or of 500 million people. And those two things add up to a very different kind of trade deal. And no one's going to sign one with you until they know which of those options it is that you're going to have.
I think there's some truth to that, unless they actually know what relationship we're going to have with the EU. It'll be very difficult for third-party countries to actually know what sort of situation they are in when they enter a deal with us. But we have been hearing, Ian, to be, you know, fair to Theresa May, that the transition period was going to be a status quo period, so that businesses didn't have to have two different sets of rules that they had to change during this whole period. I do think that only means that you're pushing difficult discussions until, you know, a later period. So I think we'll have very serious discussions to have later on. But she had been saying that the status quo position was going to be held during the transition period. But I think a more serious point, I mean, this is just so, it is quite embarrassing, this whole stunt that was pulled. But the more serious point there is how, having said that fishermen the fishing community were going to have control of our waters, it's now seeming like they're not going to have it until at least December 2020. So that is definitely a bit of a difficult position that Theresa May will have to navigate.
I know Brexit is, you know, specialist areas, both of you, but we're doing it to get back pain, which is of great interest to many people who have back pain.
I've been getting